This is the TTArtisan 75mm f1.5. It might look like a vintage lens, but this is a brand new lens that I bought for 229 euros. The reason why I bought this lens is that I think that this is the ideal tele lens to partner with the Helios 44-2, and it's a much better fit than the Jupiter 9 85mm f2. Unlike the Jupiter 9, which is the Zeiss Sonar copy, the TTArtisan is also a Biotar copy like the Helios 44-2. And the lens that it copies, some call it the king of bokeh, the legendary Zeiss Biotar 75mm f1.5. And tracking down this lens on the used market, it's quite an expensive lens and costs more than $1,000 on the used market. While the TTArtisan is only 229 euros, so it's quite a steal when you think about it. But in this video we are going to test out my TTArtisan 75mm f1.5 to see how well it fits in with the Helios 44 in looks, if it swirls like the Helios and produce oval bokeh. But first, a brief history about the Biotar design it copies. In 1927, the first Biotar was designed by Willy Walter Merter for use in cinematography, as the basic double gauze design enabled it to achieve faster lenses. And in 1930s, Willy designed multiple Biotar lenses, also the 75mm f1.5 and the 50mm f2, which the Helios 44-2 is a copy of. The first 75mm f1.5 was released in 1939 and was made with a Exacta mount. A decade later, in 1949, the second model was released with a different look, but also next to the Exacta mount, it was also available in the M42 mount. In 1953, the third model was released with an improved close focus from 1 meter to 80 centimeters, and this model is which the TTArtisan design is based on. The build of this lens is quite solid. It's actually built out of metal. There's no really visible plastic parts on it, and it feels like a real solid lens. The focusing is smooth. The lens does feel a little bit heavy. It's not too heavy for the mount, but yeah, it does have quite a substantial weight on the front because it's such a big lens. It has quite a lot of gloss, making it a little bit front heavy for a small camera setup. And shooting at a brick wall, we can see if there's any distortions, and honestly this lens is actually quite straight. There's no weird bulging, basically no distortions at all. It's just, yeah, you can see that the focus is really in the center of the shot, so like the middle 1/3 part is in focus, so you really want to put your subject really pretty much in the center of your framing, or a little bit off, but not like put your subject at the 1/3 line, because then they're likely half in focus. So you want to put them like inside, like the second 1/3 section of the framing, to get your subject totally in focus. Being 75mm, it's definitely a tele lens, but you can capture cityscapes if you get far enough for it, and of course also capturing establishing shots of streets and buildings. Shooting these wide shots, we can see how soft the sides are. It's really quite soft and dreamy looking, and with the image in the center really nice and sharp. However, if you be using this on an APS-C camera, it will crop out most of the soft sides. However, it does have a specific cool look that it makes you focus on looking at a subject in the center of the frame. Capturing a medium to close-up shots, we get the really swirly effect going on in the background, and also oval bokeh shapes on the sides. And we can compare it with the likes of the Jupiter 9 and see that the TTArtisan have a much more similar look to the Helios 44-2, while the Jupiter 9 really looks more like a more normal lens and does not really have that swirly effect like the TTArtisan and the Helios 44-2. And an improvement on the TTArtisan over the Biotar is that the minimum focus distance is now 75 centimeters instead of 80, which allows you 5 centimeters closer to your subjects. At the closest focus capturing image of a person, you can't really get really extreme close. You basically can capture half a person's face, but not like separate like just a single eye or like a mouth, as it's not really a macro lens. At its minimum focus is at like 75 centimeters, and it's just not close enough for like really getting those extreme close-ups. But if you want to capture those kind of close-ups, I suggest adding a diopter to this lens so you can focus even closer. If you want to put a focus gear ring on this lens, the diameter of the focus ring is 76 millimeters. The TTArtisan does suffer from lens breathing, which isn't really extreme noticeable unless you do really fast and far rack focusing. What I really love about the TTArtisans is that they kept the M42 mount, same as the original Biotar, which then can be used on old film cameras, but also be adapted to EF and many mirrorless cameras. But sadly, the rear design of this lens has a diameter of 54 millimeters, making it too big to fit the M42 to PL adapter. As they have opted for a different design than the original Biotar, adding a feature that you can adjust the lens mount. There are these screws on the back that locks the mount in place, but if you loosen them, you can rotate the lens separately from the mount and adjust the indicators in the correct position. However, because I'm using the Fushnit adapter, which basically does the same thing, for me it's not really a needed feature to have on the lens. However, I wish that they made the rear just a few millimeters smaller with a diameter of 51 millimeters, which would allow me to use this lens with the M42 to PO adapter and adapt this lens also to cinema cameras. Hopefully they would take this in consideration if they are going to release a new version or make more lenses that are in a similar trend, as it could attract a lot of filmmakers who are searching for affordable PL mount adapted lenses as an option. Pointing this lens to the sun, it honestly doesn't flare up as badly as the Helios, and you could use this lens without really needing a lens hood. But of course you would need to use a VND adapter when you're shooting outside, and this lens has a 58 filter thread for that, same as the original Biotar. And on mine, I've added a 58mm to 77mm 80mm OD ring on it to match with my other lenses. Though the iris ring is on the front of this lens, on the TTArtisans it's only a single clicked ring, though the design makes it look like a preset ring like the original, which it isn't. Also, instead of 10 blades aperture, the TTArtisan has a 9 blade, which still does a great job keeping the bokeh round in the center of the image. As the bokeh of this lens mostly swirls, it makes a really interesting image, especially when we letterbox it to scope. We can see how the oval bokeh gives this lens a very anamorphic look, and especially in the wider shot we get the stretch texture in the background, very similar to an anamorphic lens. So you don't really need to anamorphic this lens, as it already get a very anamorphic like look. Filming at night, this lens being f1.5, it of course allows me to use much lower ISO. I was able to use like shutter of 1/50th and ISO 500 on most well lit locations, and some locations I did use like ISO 800 where there wasn't that much lighting available, but mostly I was shooting at ISO 500 for most locations. Only for this shot, the Ironglass, I shot it as ISO 3200 because the skyline was super dark, and with ISO 3200 I was able to capture like the skyline well. So there was only one that I needed to bump up the ISO, but overall, yeah, of course f1.5 is a great lens to use at night. Honestly, I would like to see from TTArtisans to do more vintage lens remakes, like adding the Biotar 40mm f2 and the 50mm f1.4 next to the 75 t1.5, and then adding the wider Flectogon 35mm f2.4, the 28 2.4 and the 22.8, because that would make a really awesome set of lenses, as a lot of vintage lenses are getting rare right now, but also because they are rare, the prices has gone up quite a lot. And TTArtisans could remake those lenses, making it more accessible for new filmmakers to get their hands on these lenses for an affordable price. But it would also be interesting if TTArtisans would release cine versions of these lenses with PL or EF mount, so people wouldn't need to cine mod these lenses themselves, as a lot of filmmakers are interested in using vintage lenses for their film, and TTArtisans could make these very interesting line of cine lenses with a vintage look, which a lot of people right now are searching for. So hope you all found this an interesting video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!